All right, so we'll get started. My name is Ryan Brule. I'm clearly, did you want to introduce me?
Nope.
Okay. So I'm, police officer with the town of Yarmouth. This is my 10th year, coming up this January. Before that, I worked on a small town off Cape in Rehoboth. So overall, 15 years of law enforcement. I've been on 2 separate SWAT teams. I'm currently on the Cape Regional SWAT team. Just recently, in the past couple of years, really devoted a lot of my time and attention to active shooter, active killer stuff, and diving down that rabbit hole. Simply because if I go back in my law enforcement experience or my career, I know when I was getting out of the academy, I'm sure Dave and Whitey can attest to, going back 15 years ago, right after 9/11, we were all looking at, terrorist events. They wanted you stopping cars and looking for, things that would have to do with terrorism. And that has kind of totally shifted now to what is our biggest threat that we face as a community. And unfortunately, it's active shooters or active killers. So there's a lot of stuff that we're going to be talking about today that it's very heavy. It's it's a lot to take in sometimes. If you feel like it's gone beyond your capacity to think about some of this stuff, just feel free, excuse yourself. We're talking about some really serious things that have happened. And unfortunately, we learn a lot, but sometimes it takes something very serious and drastic for us to change the way that we go about our business, right? So I could kind of talk about what we do from a law enforcement standpoint, but also what this course has really been created for is for you guys, right? It's for regular, everyday civilians, and us included. When I'm off duty, I make sure I follow some of these things. A couple things I'll just remind me, usually I write them up on a board somewhere, there's nothing to write up, but 2 things I would say if you want to continue in this journey, just try to prepare yourself. There's a really good book by this guy named Mike Glover. If you're aware of him, he was in the military, special forces, and then when he got out, he started his own company about preparedness. And it's not so much of being like, a doomsday prepper, but like to be prepared for a catastrophe, right? So that could be for anything, right? Catastrophe could be a bad car accident that you've been in, your family's with you. How are you able to, at that point, do you think you're prepared enough that you'd be able to save somebody's life, right? Have you taken those steps? Have you even thought about it, right? So that book kind of goes into a lot of that stuff. And believe me, after I read it, my wife was making fun of me because my Amazon cart had, like 100 different items of like things that I wanted to buy, from tourniquets, first aid kits, all this different sort of stuff that, I realized like on my second floor, I didn't have like a safety ladder to get out, in the case that there was a fire downstairs, how I was going to get out of my house. So just a lot of stuff to think about and consider if you're, thinking about being prepared for a catastrophe, right? So this kind of goes into that same thing, but specifically what we're looking at in this class is an active shooter or an active killer. So we'll dive right in. I'm going to try to keep this under an hour. You could. Spidey wants to be here for 3. You could talk about this for this training course in itself. Just to train the trainer is like a 2 or 3 day course. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack. But so I went. This is put on by a company called Alert, and Alert is kind of like I said, usually something bad has to happen before we kind of change or change our tactics, and I'll kind of go into that. As far as from a law enforcement standpoint, but this company Alert is kind of what the MPTC, which is the Massachusetts Committee to Train Police. That's what they've kind of adopted because they're a company is out of Texas, and I'm sure you guys have all heard of Uvalde. Well, Uvalde, they were around before Uvalde, but when Uvalde came around, they were kind of the investigating company because they had laid their groundworks. And so now they come up with, there are so many training courses coming out of Alert, one of them being this one, which used to be called the Run, Hide, Fight. It's been around for a long time, but they've kind of changed it, revamped it, and for law enforcement, they've revamped a lot of the way that we respond to active attacks or active killers. So I'll go into that when we get to the history, but if you guys, I'll kind of just try to dump all this information on you. If you guys have any questions later, we'll try to answer them as much as I can. So the active attack, right? So we all think about active shooters, but an attack could be anything, right? It could be a knife, some sort of blunt object. It could be someone's car, right? So that's why the active killer is kind of the new term, right? But it has to do with an attempted mass murder. So the first thing that they talk about here is the attacker, right? So when they looked at FBI statistics and they wanted to see, well, what's the profile fit for someone who would do something so terrible, right? Well, what they came up with is there's really no profile. There's no one profile. You have, men, women, young kids, black, white, Hispanic. There's no one thing that actually fits the bill for someone that's going to do something like that. But there is a proponent that, I guess, a commonality to all these attackers that they can kind of show us, because it's really important for us to be able to pick things out. We're members of the community, right? And so we know somebody who knows somebody, or we're on social media, and a lot of the times there's usually some kind of broadcast, right? When you go back on any of these events, there's usually, oh yeah, well, there were some red flags, right? Well, what were these red flags, and how come nobody said anything about them? So that's where, talking about the attacker, there's also, there's a campaign to not name the people who did these attacks, because we don't want to give them the notoriety or any of the credit for the terrible acts that they've done. But at the same time, we kind of have to look at, well, what can we look for, right? So I've done, classes for, medical professionals before. People go to their doctor. That's huge, right? Someone sits there, they see that someone has some sort of mental illness or some sort of capacity that, they say something. Well, that whole see something, say something type of a campaign, that's the same thing that we were looking at here. If you hear or see something that, just raises, the hairs on the back of your neck, like something bad, that person's going to do something bad, it's never a bad idea to contact law enforcement, to tell somebody, like, hey, this person said this, I would hate for something bad to happen if I don't say something. So that's what that some broadcast means. So here are the things that are kind of common with all attackers, right? They have some sort of history of violence in their history, whether that be towards them or to other people. That's the exposure to violence as well. They talked about, some of the serial killers, used to torture the neighborhood pets before they actually committed any acts. That's what we're talking about, right? So there's something that they've done that's like, well, that's not right. Well, in the end, like, that might not be that serious of an offense then, but later on it could really show up as something terrible. So substance abuse, dependence, mental illness, obviously, and then a history of suicidality, which is, that's like the number one thing, right? Someone isn't going to do this unless they're ready to die themselves. Obviously the police do get involved, and when we do take people into custody. It's not always going to end in somebody getting killed, but usually they have to have that sort of mentality to get into something like this. So some risk factors that they look for in some of their behaviors would be, stalking, harassing people. They have negative family dynamics or support system, so they don't come from, most of them don't come from the greatest of families. Isolation, instability, and some other concern. Oh, it's going to play for me, that's great. So this is a map of all the active shooters or mass killings that we've had in the United States. As you can see, the years are going on, and then you're seeing all these circles showing up on the map, right? So the yellow is where a gun was used, the red is where a knife was used, and the blue is where a car is used. So just by looking at this map, you could tell that this happens pretty much everywhere all across. It's a nationwide problem that we're having, right? And we could debate, politically, and people do all the time, well, why is this happening? But the problem really is for us is that this is a common theme that we're seeing. So we have to be able to respond to it, right, as police officers. And as civilians, we have to be prepared that this may happen to us at any given time, in any given place. So, like I said, if you look, it's usually in the populated areas, right? So obviously on the East Coast, California, Texas. California is the leader, by the way, in most active shooting events. Texas has the most violent acts with a gun. So what constitutes an active killer and what constitutes this violence with a gun is we'll kind of get into. It's kind of what the FBI, when they look at statistics, how they define things. So location of attacks, the number one thing is business, right? We all like to think like, well, obviously these all happen at schools. That's what the media has told us, right? It's not true. Most of this happens in places of business. This is actually considered a place of business, believe it or not. Houses of worship actually do fall under this. Outdoor, so you're talking open air, events, a parade, something like that. That's what outdoors is usually considered. Then the school, and then other around there, which could fit the bill for anything else. This is kind of a silly graph I don't even usually like to show, but just the connection to that place. So like every time we look into the past, at the school shooting, they like to say, well, did the person go there? Did they have any connection there? So, I mean, if you look at it, it's pretty much a flip of the coin. Yes, no, maybe. It doesn't really matter. So this just is a quote that they throw out there. Obviously, same thing. Was it Einstein that said the definition of insanity is repeating something over and over, expecting a different outcome? It's the same thing, right? If we don't look at our past, we're going to repeat it over and over. So I'm not going to get into this. If we had 3 hours, I could get into every single one of these cases, and I kind of break down our debrief of like what happened, right? And that's kind of what they do at the Train the Trainer. We kind of go into every single case and we talk about what happened in each case, and then we can talk about what they learned from it. It takes a long time, right? So if you really want to look into this, and if you really want to, like I have, just to try to better prepare myself, I guess, or just stuff that I'm interested in. There's a really good documentary series on Showtime that they did. It was actually before Las Vegas even happened. I'm just trying to remember the name of it, but they have a really good documentary series that does exactly this. They break down each active shooting event up until Las Vegas, and it kind of goes into it doesn't focus on either side. There's no pull as far as like it doesn't focus on the killer, doesn't focus on anything around that. It's just the facts, right? Exactly what happened at what time. This is what happened next. This is how the police responded. Here's a witness who saw this. It's a really good documentary series. So there's a lot of stuff out there as far as breaking down each one of these. We'll talk about the only one I'm going to talk about tonight is Virginia Tech, because it does have has some really good learning points to talk about. But can you guys think, and this is way before my time, but can you think of the first, because there's been active killers for our entire history of the United States, right? It's not like all of a sudden they just showed up. It's been happening for quite a long time. But can you guys think about what the first one was that gained media attention?
Texas, University of Texas.
Yeah, the shooter, right?
The shooter from
the
the
tower. Yeah, I think it was 77. So that was the first one that gained media attention, right? So if we go back, and this is something we're taught in police training, but if we go back, that was the first time that they showed up and they were like, we need somebody that knows more than just the regular patrol officer to figure out how to get this situation under control. They created SWAT teams. That was kind of like the jump off point for SWAT teams. We need someone with better training, better tactics, and better weapons in order to take care of somebody with this caliber of training that he had, right? And then so fast forward, what was the next big media event that you could think of as far as active killer goes? There wasn't really between that. Yeah, Columbine was the next one, right? So we didn't see all, did they happen? Absolutely, they happened between now and between 77 and Columbine. But did we talk about them? Did the media cover them? No, they didn't. Not as much, right? So Columbine happened, and so from our standpoint, that's where tactics changed again. They said for the clock tower, they said we need a SWAT team. Then we went to Columbine. Well, does anyone know what happened at Columbine as far as like the police? What happened?
They surrounded and waited.
Yeah, because that's what they were trained to do, right? Because they said
Contain.
call the SWAT team. So after that happened, obviously it wasn't a good response because people died because of it, right? So they had to go back. They had to think about, well, how can we change our tactics so that we can save lives? Well, today we are trained that if you're the first one there, you're the first one going in, right? And that's a school, that's any active shooter, because we're not going to sit there and wait for a SWAT team, because that could take hours. And believe, like, if our regional SWAT team covers from Bourne all the way to Provincetown, you're going to be waiting a long time for us to gather and then get somewhere. So that's lost time that we can't afford. That's why, you know, everyday patrol officers are being trained to go in and stop the attack. So can anyone guess how long, on average, it takes for the police to respond to calls? And I will preface this with, it is the best response time in the world. Does anyone want to make a guess? It's a number of minutes. So anyone want to make a guess?
10. 4 to 6.
5.
It's 3. 3 minutes on average, police response time. And like I said, it is the quickest in the world. But how long do you think 3 minutes is if someone's trying to kill you? A long 3 minutes, right? So number of deaths. This is how casualty rates get higher and higher, right? And I talked about one of them, which is a slow police response. Well, how quickly we arrive now? 3 minutes. That's the fastest in the world. But that will determine how long it takes for people to die. We looked at Uvalde, right? Uvalde, they didn't go in right away, and guess what? That caused people to die. That caused people who were injured to actually bleed out. And if you look into some of the after action on that, it's actually pretty sad. One of the police officers, I don't know if anyone's aware, one of the police officers, his wife was a teacher in the room, been shot, and he went to go in to help her, to save her, and everyone held him back and said, no, you can't go in that room. I don't know about you, but if I was in that case, I would have imagined that my response would be a little bit different, but who knows? It's hard to Monday morning quarterback on somebody when you're in that type of a situation, right? Target availability, we saw that with Las Vegas, right? He was basically in a elevated position, and he had a sea of people and an unlimited amount of guns and ammunition. So this is the 3 minutes I talked about. Like I said, 3 minutes is a long time if someone's trying to kill you, but we're going to get there as fast as we possibly can. So your disaster response, right? And this is kind of interesting, and this is kind of, for me at least, it's really interesting to look at, because if you take all this information I'm going to give you, it doesn't only apply to active killer events, but it's just the natural reaction for people's body to respond to stress, right? And especially high stress situations like that, there is only one way for anyone to get accustomed to high stress situations, and that is to be in high stress situations, right? That's why you see people that come back from the military, a lot of times something really crazy happens and they are cool, calm, and collected, right? Because they've been in high stress situations before. So there's things that you can do to prepare yourself, but really all it is to gain that sort of resilience is to put yourself through high stress situations. It's really all there is to it. So here are the 3 stages. What's when a disaster strikes? Here's what happens when what your body goes through, right? And we'll talk about these more at length, but it's denial, deliberation, and decisive movement. That denial phase, I hope after we talk about it, and that's all we're doing, right? We're just talking about it, and hopefully thinking in your mind, well, what would I do? And that denial phase goes through everyone's mind. And all that we're trying to do here is I hope we can take that denial phase, and instead of going into everyone heard of fight or flight? There's fight, flight, and the new one that everyone's kind of doing research on is freeze. And the freeze is the denial. Freeze is the, oh my God, something bad happened and I'm just going to stand here like this. Because your brain, and it has nothing to do with you being scared. It does in the end, but really it's a natural reaction. Your body's just naturally reacted to go, what am I seeing? What is happening? And you can look at video after video of this happening, right? So something really crazy happens and you just see some people just stand there because their brain isn't processing it fast enough. And I hope after we talk about it, right, at least you'll be able to pick up on the signs of what's happening, and then you can move from that denial phase right to that deliberation phase, right? So I know what I'm seeing, I know what I'm hearing. Everyone says, and if you look at, I've watched, witness testimony after witness testimony of what happened after the fact. And everybody says when they get into an active shooter type situation is, I didn't think they were gunshots. I thought someone was, throwing fireworks off, or I thought somebody was doing this, when it doesn't make any sense at all, right? But everyone wants to go to that denial. That's not happening. There's no one's shooting a gun here. That's crazy. It could happen, right? So if it does happen, let's move right to the deliberation phase. And then let's make a decisive movement to save our lives and save the lives of the people around us. So we'll talk about denial. This video's
Place like this street in New York City, if you were unfortunate enough to be the victim of a crime or taken ill unexpectedly, you might think that surrounded by all these people, someone would intervene. After all, isn't there safety in numbers? Psychologists say no. Research suggests that often a victim is less likely to receive assistance when surrounded by a group rather than a single bystander. When people are in a crowd, it's easier to pass the buck. It's what psychologists call the diffusion of responsibility. Liverpool Street Station in London, a busy thoroughfare for commuters. Unknown to these passers-by, Peter is an actor. As part of an experiment on bystander apathy, he's pretending to be ill. How long before he gets help? Helping would be inconvenient or even risky. He lies there for more than 20 minutes and no one raises an eyebrow.
Please, somebody help me.
It's always very distressing to watch situations like this where people are obviously suffering and no one's actually helping them. But what we have here is two conflicting rules. One is the rule that we ought to help, and the other is the rule that we ought to do what everybody else is doing. And here you have effectively a group of strangers who are exerting the pressure not to intervene, not to help. And it's very difficult to rebel.
Ruth, another actor, takes Peter's place. How long before she receives help?
So we kind of get the point there, right? Anybody ever heard of the flat tire theory? Like if you get a flat tire on the side of the road on a busy highway in a metropolitan area, how likely is it for someone to pull over and help you? It's like zero, right? If you're on a rural road, on a dirt road somewhere, and you get a flat tire and you're waiting for, who's going to stop, right? It's that level of responsibility that we have, right? So, and that's just kind of the denial. I guess it doesn't really fall in line with but except for the fact that that's not my problem. This isn't my problem. You know, that those loud bangs I hear way over there, that's not my problem. You know, that's kind of what they're going for here. So deliberation, like I said, if we can shrink that freeze moment down, if we could shrink that denial moment as short as possible, we can start to deliberate. And deliberate just means that, right? We're going to think about what we need to do next. And I'll kind of go into more of it, but, you know, for instance, you came into this room. Do you guys know how many exits there are in this room to get out, right? They're clearly marked,
Yeah.
you know, here and there. And I'll get into more of that, but that's like one of the first things. That if we can get out of a situation, that's the first thing that we should do. You have the highest likelihood of success and of survivability if we can just remove ourselves from that situation. So that's where our deliberation comes in. We're going to think about, well, what steps do I need to do? So that's where, this is the science, right, that's based on it. The human brain and the lizard brain. Our human brain is what we do our everyday thought processes with, right? We're able to sit down, slow down, and just really think about our everyday lives. Our lizard brain was through an evolutionary process that kept us alive. That's basically what keeps us breathing, what keeps our heart beating, and it's supposed to be our fight or flight right there, right? But as you can see, fight, flight, or freeze, sometimes in a high-stress situation, our lizard brain takes over, and it actually it hurts us in the end as far as being able to make logical, fast decisions that our lizard brain takes over. We talked about that, fight, flight, or freeze. So this graph here is really interesting. Down here is your BPMs, or your beats per minute, right? So think about this as your body is responding to stress. And there's no way around it, right? Everybody deals with stress differently, but when we are stressed out, this is what our body does, and this is how we react. So at 60 beats per minute is your normal, everyday, you know, you're relaxed and you're able to think. Obviously your this is where most people are at, unless you have a bad heart or something, then or out of shape, then it's probably a little bit higher. But 60 beats per minute is where we're all at as a baseline. The 90 beats in that yellow right there is usually where things kind of like, you perk up, you hear something. You know, for us, it's usually like a call comes over the radio. You know, we get sent somewhere. We're kind of like thinking to ourselves like, oh man, like, you know, wonder what this is going to turn out to be. That red, that 120 beats per minute, is you get into a situation and it is stressful. Like there are people yelling, screaming. You're trying to like figure out, everything's getting thrown at you really fast, and you're trying to pick out exactly what your brain is trying to process everything, right? And so what ends up happening is, like I said, our lizard brain's taking over. It does some good things for us, right? So at that 120 beats per minute, it actually throws blood into your major muscle groups. So you're actually, you know, ever heard that about the mom who has her kids under the car and she's able to lift it? Well, she was under a stressful situation, right? That could actually happen. You become stronger when your lizard brain takes over, starts dumping all these hormones and chemicals into your bloodstream that are able to help you perform. But it also, at that same moment when your lizard brain's taking over, you ever hear of tunnel vision? When something like that happens, or audio exclusion, I can't even say that word. We tune stuff out, right? People say like, didn't you hear him say that to you when that was happening? Didn't you see that happening? And you're like, no, I had no idea. Well, it's because we actually, sometimes they block things out. They don't hear what's going on, and they don't see what's going on because they're so focused, zero focus on what's in front of them. And then that just gets even more heightened at the next level, that 150 beats per minute. Your focus is right down to the small little tunnel of what's going on. You're blocking everything else out, and everything. Some people actually feel like a time is either going really fast and they can't keep up with it, or time is almost going so super slow, like they were there for forever. It's just a strange thing that happens when we get stressed out. And then the black is actually should be what's called cold brown, is because people actually, and it has nothing to do with you know, whether they're not feeling brave or they're not, has nothing to do with any of that. It's just your body's natural response is that you lose being able to not go to the bathroom on yourself, basically. So they lose control of their bowels, they lose control of their bladder. I have friends that were in the military that have been in firefights, and afterwards they realized that they had wet their pants, and it had nothing to do with the fact that they were scared. It's just your body thinks you're going to die, so they take some of the resources that they had for something else, and they move them to somewhere where you need them, right? So just to be aware of that's what could possibly happen if we get to a really stressful situation. So this right here, this is in Paris, and I don't remember the whole background kind of, but there's an attack going on. I want to say it was a guy wielding a knife. There's an attack going on at the front of the store. So I'm going to play that again. All right. Look at the mom. There's a lot of people to look at in this video, right? This is what I'm talking about. That, oh my God, something very stressful just happened. Well, let's see how people react. And if you look at this mom, she has her baby in the baby carrier, right? How many times that day do you think? Because I know I have 2 little kids. How many times that day do you think she took that baby out of that baby carrier? Probably at least 10, right? If she's walking around with it. She's probably, and that kid's a little bit older, she's probably, unless she just bought that carrier that day, which I doubt it, she's probably done that hundreds of times, taking her baby in and out of that carrier. Watch what happens when something bad is about to happen. She forgets the buckle, she rips the kid out, the kid's still buckled. She's panicking, panic. If you watch the elderly man with the white hair, he to talk about fight, flight, or freeze, he is in between freeze and flight, and he just kind of falls on the ground. You know, so this is what we're kind of talking about, right? This is your body's natural. You would hope that you could try to get around it and stay cool-headed, but this is what your body does. Excuse my language, but it's the oh shit moment, right? It's the this is serious, this is happening, and how am I going to respond? So if we know how our body responds, then and we know that it's a natural occurrence, then maybe we're able to move past it. So deliberation. Let's talk about. Everyone knows what the Station nightclub fire was that happened in Rhode Island. So this is kind of a dive into that. And when I talked about the exits, right? This is, I hope, if nothing else, that you guys take away from this is every public building that you go in, you look and you see how many exits are here. Because my wife thinks I'm crazy, but that's the first thing I do. I not only pick it out, but I make sure that I talk to every one of my kids. Like, we all know where we're going if something bad happens over here, right? We're going over there. So, Station Nightclub, this is easy if I come over here and show you guys. So, Station Nightclub, was it Great White? Was that the band that was playing?
Yeah.
Great White's playing on the stage. Whoever's grand idea it was to throw pyrotechnics into a drop ceiling, I don't know, but that's what happened, right? So they're performing here on the stage. This is where the fire happens, right? So in red, you can see the number of exits. So this is the main exit, or I'm sorry, this is the main entrance hall right here where everybody came in, number 1. And then you had the side door next to the stage, which really, if we're honest, it probably, if you look at the video, it probably was only available to be used as an exit for about 15 seconds before the fire kind of engulfed this whole area. Then you had, in the kitchen, you had another exit, which, okay, maybe the public didn't know that was there. But my guess is, if you go to a Great White concert, that you probably, at one point or another, went to the bar. So if you went to the bar, you would have noticed that there was another exit right here. Well, guess what? Nobody noticed that. Nobody noticed that there were exits there. And the reason why you had so many casualties here was because everybody tried to use the same door. If you look at the Colorado movie theater shooting, same thing. When you go to a movie theater, everyone kind of knows that if you run in front of the screen, there's usually 2 green lights with exits on either side. Well, the shooter came in one of the exits, right? So everybody did what they thought was the right thing was to run out the way that they came in. Well, if everyone's running towards the same thing, what happens? A bottleneck. What nobody thought to do was, as he's coming up the aisles, was to go towards that other exit past him on the other side. So, like I said, if nothing else, think about your exits. And this is, the video I just talked about, and we'll kind of go through it. So the fire's already started. Talk about that freeze moment, right? The denial. How many people look panicked right now? Not many. Now the band actually stops playing. People are still not running for the door. They're not sure if it's part of the show or some people are milling around like, there might be a fire. Now the fire alarm goes off. Now everyone realizes, oh, this is serious. But still, people aren't really moving. And no one's going towards any exits until panic ensues. And then everyone's pushing and shoving each other towards the door. So, and we'll see in this next slide. So this is where, unfortunately, afterwards, all the bodies were found inside the Station nightclub fire. The orange circles are representative of the victims. So, well, just like what I talked about before, right? Everyone wanted to use that main entrance. Well, that's what bottlenecked everything. And I don't know if that picture's on here or not, but there's actually people stacked like cordwood on top of each other. They actually created a wall that nobody could get through. Even first responders, so firefighters that were trying to show up, they couldn't get into the building because there's so many bodies piled up on top of each other. And think about how chaotic of an environment that was with the fire alarms going off, people panicking, smoke's filling the air, you can't breathe. You're not going to be thinking, especially if you have, I'm sure like a lot of people in there, they had some sort of alcohol in their system. They weren't going to be thinking clearly of like, how do I save my life? So, but like I talked about before, that main bar that was right here, this exit, not one person was found near. Not one person. That's the picture of people being stacked on top of each other. So what can we do to move past the denial phase and into the deliberation phase? Calm yourself. Well, it's easier said than done, but what can we do? One trainer that I had, one of the classes I went to, he said, breathe out the stupid. And it just stuck with me because it's true. You get into a really serious situation, what can you do? Breathe out the stupid. And it sounds dumb, but it's actually, you calm yourself down and you're able to think like, all right, what do I need to do next, right? So breathing is huge. And it actually, you know, I don't need to tell you guys, there's study upon study that shows that you can actually, you know, affect all your whole body systems with breathing correctly. And that's one thing you can actually do yourself to try to calm yourself. And then shift your emotion, right? So they did a study, and I think it was through Alert, but they did a study that showed people who stayed fearful were more apt to become victims, as opposed to people who changed their attitude towards being like almost indignant or angry at the fact that this was happening to them. Like, how dare this person come in here and do this to me? I'm going to fight back. And if you change your attitude and you shift your emotion, you had a much higher chance of survivability. And then the one clear thing, you know, that science has shown is to stay fit, right? It's cardiovascular systems being what they are. That's the one thing that, you know, as far as in the police world, in order to try to train for situations like this, what do we put ourselves through? Physical activity, right? If we put ourselves through physical activity and then we do the drill again, that's going to kind of change the way that our body, because what happens when you get stressed out? It's almost the same, not exactly the same, but it's almost the same as if you went and you did, you know, an 800-yard sprint. Your heart's racing. It's harder to actually do the things that you need to do and to think clearly. So staying fit is huge. So deliberation, thinking about it, right? Scripting. We're scripting right now. We're talking about it, right? You could script many different ways. You could script to yourself, right? I do it all the time. I'm driving to a call. I go, when I get there, I'm going to do this. It's probably wrong because dispatch probably messed it up, and I'm probably going to show up there and it's going to be totally different. But I can script to myself, right? I can talk about what I'm going to do with the facts that I have so far. We could script with each other. I script with my kids all the time. Just a quick little story I have. Me and my kids have we have like a password. So like if anything, I told them, if anything ever is really serious and I need you to listen to me immediately, I'm going to use the word butterfly. Well, I didn't come up with the word butterfly, but they said we're going to use the word butterfly. And so, you know, we drilled it, we talked about it. Well, we have, in our neighborhood, we have one of our neighbors has a mental illness, and she came over and she was spouting off some really crazy things, trying to talk to my 6-year-old daughter at the time, and I got to the point where I said, "Oh, time out! It's time to get police involved." So I just looked at my daughter and I said, "Go in the house now, please." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Butterfly." And she said, ran right to the house. So it works, right? Our deputy chief tells a similar story about he was off duty and he had something similar. I think he used like watermelon or something. And he ended up, there was another officer that was working with us. He was chasing somebody, and he was off duty with his family, and he saw him running after the suspect, and he said, "I'll be right back," and he ran off, and he helped get the guy cuffed, and afterwards his daughter was crying. He said, "I'm so sorry, Daddy sometimes has to go do police stuff." And she said, I know that. It's because you didn't say the word watermelon. So that's just a little, the script thing, right? We've got to talk about it. Even when I go into anything at all, we go to an event, I talk to my kids. I say, "This is the event that we're going to. Here's what's going to happen if something bad happens. You're going to listen to me, and we're going to get out of it, right?" So just talking about it is scripting, and that's what we're doing today. And sometimes that's all you really need to actually put things into motion. And then you could go as far as to practice it, right? So with policing, someone gets out of the academy, we script, right, with our field training officers. So you ride along with another police officer for a little bit of time, and they kind of put you through some scripting. Like, so if this happens, we'll do this, right? Or if this happens, what will you do here? So then to put that into practice, you can either go to a real life situation, or you could do like a fire drill, right? That's practice. That's going, not only scripting, we're gonna talk about it, but we're also gonna do it. Just to show of hands in the room, how many people have a meetup point at their house if they have a fire? Yeah. Don't you think that's like really important to have, right? Even if it's just your neighbors, right, that tell you, like if you live by yourself and you say, if there's ever a fire in my house, I'm going to be right here, tell your neighbors so that people aren't going back into the house to look for you, right? So just one more thing to think about. That's scripting, but you can also practice it if you really want to. Rick Rescola, anyone know who this guy is? There's an awesome book by him. It's called Heart of a Soldier. So Rick Rescola was a Vietnam War veteran. If you ever saw that movie with Mel Gibson called We Were Soldiers, the X-Ray LZ, he was the hero that was put, his picture was taken, it was put on the book that was, the cover of the book that was about that whole campaign. He was not even from, I don't want to talk too long, but he wasn't even from the U.S., he was from the U.K., and he met up with a guy who was an American soldier, and he said, if you want to go kill communists, come with me and join the army. So he joined up. He ended up getting deployed to Vietnam, and then, like I said, he became a war hero. Well, he goes on in life. He's an amazing guy. Like that's just like a quarter of his life, if you really want to read that book. But then he becomes head of security for Morgan Stanley in the World Trade Center. So he's there for the first bombing. He has a lot of intel because he was in that kind of intelligence world. So one of his buddies actually tells him, like, there's going to be a terrorist attack. Well, the first one happens, right? So he goes to Morgan Stanley. He says, we got to get out of here. All my contacts in the intel tell us that there's going to be another attack. It's going to happen. It's imminent. And Morgan Stanley says, well, our lease really isn't up until 2015, so you're just going to have to do the best with what you can. He's like, all right, well, if that's the case, I'm going to drill everybody. When you guys think that it's safe, I'm going to come in and we're going to do a drill. And he did evacuation drills to the point where he was like that guy was like, oh, Rick, like, oh, God, Rick. And they would sit down at a like morning meeting, no one even had their coffee yet, and he'd be like, drill, everybody out, let's go. And people were like, oh. And so they kind of put up with him. Well, fast forward, 2001, 9/11 happens, right? His entire floor, minus 3 people, survived because he was able to get everybody out of the building. And the 3 people that didn't survive were him and his 2 assistants because they went back up into the floor to make sure that nobody was there. So, be a Rick Rescola, I tell people. Like, if people are mad at you because you're drilling them for safety, that's good, because one day they might actually need it, and all you gotta say is like, just remember Rick Rescola. He actually saved lives because he was a pain in the ass. And there's a monument to him. Like I said, that book it's just an amazing book. He's an amazing guy.
Little less than a month ago, 3 childhood friends were on a train bound for Paris, and they heard a gunshot. Amid screams and commotion of the passengers, they quickly focused on a man wielding an AK-47. Almost instantly, one of them said, "Let's go," and the 3 ran toward the shooter. Those 3 friends are with us here today. Thank you, Alec, Spencer, and Anthony, for what you did on that train and for joining us here.
Do you guys know what he's talking about?
And that's because after
Do you guys remember that happened in the train in France?
Yeah, they disarmed the shooter.
Yeah, yeah. So that's another response, right? You know, a decisive action, decisive movement. Some people can flee, some people can evacuate, some people can fight back, and we'll talk about the run, fight, and hide, and why it's a little bit different now. But those are your 3, deliberate actions that you can take. So, denial, we talked about it, right? Don't deny. If you hear something that sounds like gunshots, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck, right? So don't wait. Don't say, oh, that's not gunshots. What's the worst that could happen if you go, those are gunshots, let's get out of here? Like, oh, actually it was, a backfire of a car. Okay, well, I bet. It happens, right? But I'd rather be safe than sorry. Go right to deliberation. So the reason why they got away from the hide portion of this, right, is because, and if I have time, I'll go into Virginia Tech, is why playing dead is a terrible idea. If you play dead, you become a very easy, soft target. Unfortunately, what happens is people play dead, and then they are shot multiple times as the shooter has time to walk up and down, and if you're in the same room as him, it's never a good idea. You have a much better chance of surviving if you try to run away, or when they say deny, they could also mean deny access, right? Denying access could mean going into a bathroom, shutting and closing the door and locking it. You have a better chance of surviving that way than if you would. The freeze is to collapse onto the floor. Unfortunately, a lot of people do it, and then I'll just lay here and he'll think that I'm dead and he won't shoot me. Well, statistics show, and unfortunately we have a lot of case studies because of what's happened, that playing dead is not a good idea. The hide and hope, same thing, right? You're a soft target. If you're found in a place that you haven't tried to deny access to, you are a soft target. So the run, hide, fight, like I just talked about, they changed to avoid, deny, defend. Avoid it, which means pretty much run, get out of that situation. Deny it, so deny means deny access to yourself, and then defend if you have to. If it's between me and somebody else, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down fighting, right? And that's something that, wherever situation that you're in, that's something that needs to be discussed. But if it was up to me, I'm not going to just play dead on the ground, okay? So I'm going to skip over this one just for the sake of time. But avoiding and running is your best chance of survivability, right? If you remove yourself from the situation, you're out of it, right? You've saved yourself. So know your exits. That's, like I said, if that's nothing else, please take that away. Every time you go to a public area, know how to get out of it. And then call 911 because there are other people inside that are going to need help. And you as a witness can really help. So here's the case of someone that's decided to hide, right? So, or she's trying to deny access to herself. So she runs into this room, right? Now, not knowing the layout or really to know exactly what's happening in this situation, let's just say for the sake of just this training, that there's something bad going on over here. Do you see anything where she is that she could potentially hide herself a little bit better? See how there's a ladder right there?
Yeah.
That ladder probably goes somewhere, right? A roof, maybe, or maybe goes to a little, a little alcove or something up there. Probably. Yeah, could be. But the fact is, there's always someplace better to hide. Now, is there anything else around her that might be a clue as to maybe she shouldn't just sit there?
Is that like a trash bag or something?
Yeah, that's a dumpster, I think. Does anyone notice what this is? This right here?
Is that a door?
It's a door. Yeah, with a push bar. All she has to do is push it. She's probably on the outside somewhere. Now, not knowing exactly what the situation or layout is, like it's hard to, but people do strange things in stressful situations, and she thought maybe if I just lay here, I'll be fine, when really, she could have taken extra steps to save herself. So, to deny or hide, right, to deny access to yourself, you get into a room, lock the door, obviously, turn the lights out, and out of sight. So we teach kids in school lockdown drills, right? It serves a purpose, and it does work. So if you're going to barricade yourself, you got to think about, like, if I'm in this room, what could I use to deny access to myself? Well, if we were in this room, obviously this is a big room, but let's close the shades, let's lock that door. So not to go too far into it, but when we talk about breaching, right, firefighters are much better than police officers at doing it, but we're talking about breaching, right? So doors are either inward or outward opening. So if you're in a room, that's the first thing you got to think about. Is that door going to be, this one right here, if you look at it, has a push bar, so it's outward opening, right? So when you push it this way. Well, you can't barricade that, or you could put some tables and furniture in front of it to try to keep them from coming in, but you can't lock it unless you have something else, right? So at the top of that door there, if you look, there's a hinge, right? That hinge, if you block that hinge, that door will be unable to be used. So they do make products that some buildings do have. They use like a cone, you slide over the top of it, and it keeps it from being tight. But like, if you take your belt off, you wrap that around there, and you tie it as tight as you can, that's also like, the door isn't going to open as easy as you think it would. So, heavier the better. more stuff you put in front of that, the better. You can always just barricade yourself more, right, than you think you can if you just stop and think about it for a second. So they're showing you the same thing in this picture. She could have taken that, put that in front of the door, kind of like to barricade herself in, just to deny access to her. If even they were able to open the door, maybe they won't be able to actually get to her. Door stops, right? So on the opposite, so if that was inward opening towards us, or on the case of someone on the outside, inward opening, outward opening this way, if you put a door stop right there underneath, that person can't open the door, right? So just look around. If there's a door stop right there and you can jam it under the door jamb, you could keep somebody from gaining access to you. So kind of what I talked about, inward and outward opening doors, ropes, tension sleeve is that thing I talked about that slides over the top of that hinge. A rope or belt if you need to. In one case in Virginia Tech, that's what happened. Someone tied something around the handle and laid down on the ground just to try to keep it shut tight as possible. And then obviously if the building is equipped with those, you can. I'm going to skip over this too, second time. That kind of just talks about what happened at Sandy Hook and the teacher. I don't know if you guys ever heard this story about the teacher that ended up getting shot because they were all hiding in the closet. And when she came out, the gunman directed his attention on her while she was able to save the kids that some of them were able to get out. So. Now, denying or hiding, if that doesn't work, and if something happens and the person is able to gain access, the safest place to stand in any room is going to be right up against the entrance, just inside. So like kind of where this guy is, right? So you can see that the door is here, and they're on either side of him, right? Because that's the best time to surprise someone. No one's expecting, and just from someone who clears buildings a lot, the first thing that we are told to do is check your corners. So you come into a room, you're checking your corners. Well, unless they're military trained, they usually aren't going to. They're going to walk into the room, and that's your best time to put a jump on. If they have a gun, grabbing the gun and getting that pointed in a safe direction or away from people is the number one priority, right? And then after that, fighting. And so shifting your emotions again, right? Become angry, become indignant at the fact that how dare somebody come in and try to take your life or take the life of anybody else in this room. And by fighting back any way necessary, you know what I mean? There's no rules in that, right? Scratching eyes, gouging things, hitting men in the groin, like that's all fair game when someone's trying to kill you. If some teachers, we talk about this to them, they say, well, we can't bring pepper spray into schools, it's against the rule. I say, well, is there anything against bringing in like bee spray or hornet spray? Because if someone can't see, it's hard for them to fight, right? So just try to think outside the box as far as like, this person's trying to kill you, how can I defend myself? This is actually a pretty good video to show. So, same thing, something's happening at the front of the store. Watch everyone's reactions, right? This guy obviously is the center of attention right here. What do you think his reaction is going to be?
Hit him over the head.
Fight back, right? I'm a fighter. What do you think that lady on the ground is?
Playing dead.
Yeah. Becoming a soft target. Yeah. So everyone has different responses, right? Be the guy that grabbed the wine bottle. Don't be the lady that decided to play possum on the ground. That'd be my best advice. So, Brian Murphy, he was involved in another active shooting attempt. And he was actually shot while he was responding to, God, I should know this, but he was responding to a church or some sort of religious building. I can't remember, but there was a shooting there, and he responded to it. And then when he got to the parking lot, he took several rounds. And just changing the attitude, so he survived that when he probably shouldn't have because of his mental attitude. He said, I'm not going out in a parking lot, I'm not going out like this, I'm not going to let my wife down, I'm not going to let my daughter down, and I'm not going to let my stepkids down. And he ended up surviving. He crawled his way to safety, and they found him. So this is the meat and potatoes of this whole training, right? Avoid, deny, defend, run, hide, fight. Whatever way you guys need to think about it, that's just remember it that way. Get out of it if you can, avoid it, run away. If you can't, if you're in the building and you can't get out, deny access to yourself, hide, and if all else fails and you have to fight back, you have the right to fight back. Someone is trying to take your life. How dare they try to do that to you? Don't go out without a fight. What you do matters. This is the whole training right here in a nutshell. If you know, take what you will, but this is what the training is about, right? To give you guys options, to know how your body's going to perform, and then to make a decisive act in order to save the life of yourself or others. So I will go through this as fast as possible. Everyone knows what happened at Virginia Tech, right? There was an armed gunman. He shot 2 people. 2007, I think it happened. He then went to Norris Hall. He got inside. It was like a engineering class, science and engineering. Kids were in class there, in session. He gets inside and he chains the doors. These red doors right here, so people can't get out that front door. First responders can't get in. He goes to the second floor, and once again, there's a documentary out just on the Virginia Tech case, and it goes through witnesses that were in each room. So I will kind of just go through, to the best of my memory, exactly what happened. So he goes through down the hall, and he starts shooting. 206 is where he goes in first. Obviously a lot of casualties in that room. He then goes down to this room. He returns back to a couple of them. So, as you can see here, he goes in. In this room, I want to say, there was an Air Force ROTC kid that rushed him as he came in. He had already heard the gunshots. He rushed him as he came in, which kind of startled him. He did get shot. He was killed. But he ended up, it startled the shooter enough to, he put down the rounds that he put down, but then he left the room, which saved all the people in yellow here. Then he goes into this room. This is the room of playing dead. People decided to freeze and lay down, and you can see how it didn't work out so well.
Is red dead?
The red is dead, yeah. Yep.
And yellow's wounded?
Injured, and green is not injured. This room was being taught by a Holocaust survivor, was the professor. He was like an 84-year-old man. And he heard the gunshots. He ran to the door, and he held it tight, and he said, "Everyone get out." He had enough. We talk about being into a stressful situation and being able to overcome that with, cool-headedness. Well, that guy's been through some stuff, right? He's seen stress, and he knows how it works. And he heard those gunshots, and he was able to think clearly and say, "Guys, get out of here." So all these green dots up here, those are all the people that survived that room. This red dot right here was him. He got shot. He got shot through the door. This room, that's the one I was talking about, where the classmates laid down and they held their foot on that door and did not allow him access into the room. Everybody survived. So what you do matters, right? That's kind of a very morbid way of looking at like a debrief as far as what happened at Virginia Tech. Obviously, it's traumatizing no matter how you look at it. But if you could take something away from something as tragic as that, and look at, well, how could they have done better, right? And that's kind of a case-by-case scenario. Each room kind of acted differently. One room, the first time it happens, there's no way to really respond without taking bullets, right? So what happened in that first room. The second room, as he goes through and everybody plays dead, he actually goes back into that room several times because he knows there's soft targets in this room. I'm going to avoid the ones where people ran at me. I'm going to avoid the one where they held the door shut. I'm going to avoid the one, that's hard for me to actually get as many casualties as possible. Because we all know in the end, that's what they're trying to do, right? They are going to go out in a blaze of glory, and they're going to try to take out as many people as possible because that's how they gain notoriety. So keep it hard for them. Make it hard for them because that's their goal. If you can fight back just a little bit, that's kind of getting in their way, and they're automatically saying, well, this is too difficult. I need to go find easier targets. Because that's why they're going to places like schools and churches and places where they know people are soft targets, right? So don't become a soft target. So what to do when the police arrive? I kind of talked about how our tactics have changed, right? We're running into buildings now. We're not waiting on the outside, waiting for a SWAT team. So we are going in and we are looking. You better believe that if there's somebody inside killing people, that's our number one priority, right? We are going to stop the threat. And you better believe that's going to happen as fast as humanly possible, right? So we are going in looking for a threat. The number one thing you want to not look like is a threat, right? So even training for us, when we go in, I just did a class on solo officer response and plain clothes or off duty, right? Well, what's the number one threat that we have to think about? The guy doing the shooting. What's the number two threat we have to think about? The people who are coming behind us, our coworkers, right? Because not everybody knows what I look like. If I'm in another town, they don't know what I look like. So we have to really be mindful that as police officers are going into a stressful situation, same thing happens to us, that happens to all of you, right? Tunnel vision, audio exclusion, all that stuff that we talked about, that's happening to police officers because we're people just like everybody else. So if you can do everything in your like what they teach us if we're off duty, we have a badge on us and we are going to do this because people catch motion in their eye, we're going to say police, 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 police. When you guys are in this situation, show your hands. That's the first thing we look at. Hands, hands, hands. Show your palms and don't move. Don't scream. Don't make anything sudden movements. Just show your hands. So this is what we talked about the priority, right? We're going to stop the killing, then we're going to stop the dying, and we're going to evacuate the injured. This has come, and I would just say in the past few years, between the time of the stop the killing and stop the dying, we used to be along the mindset of, okay, we'll go in there, we'll stop the threat, and then as soon as everything's kind of warm, or the warm zone we used to call it, we'll let the paramedics come in and they'll assess all the injured, and we will have to step over injured people in order to go address the threat. Well, that's kind of changed, where now, yeah, we're going to go in, we're going to stop the killing, that's our number one priority, but we are also carrying on us a lot of first aid, medical, and especially tourniquets, quick clot, and basically a way to plug holes and stop people from bleeding out, right? So we are going to be doing that as soon as we know that the threat is taken care of. And for most cases, 97.3 I think is the latest average, 97.3 cases, there is one shooter involved in all X, right? So once that one shooter has been taken out, it doesn't necessarily mean that the threat is altogether done, because there may be another shooter, that 3% chance. But the next thing we're going to do too is stop the dying. So in that case, if you guys aren't medically trained, I suggest you go get yourself at least the first level of like first aid, right? Take a class, go to the FD has really good trainers as far as putting tourniquets on. I am not a licensed instructor in doing any of that, so I can't really show you, but get yourself comfortable in tourniquets. Tourniquets, tourniquets, tourniquets. They save lives, they save lives, they save lives. There, now you can remember that when you go and buy yourself a tourniquet, and you put it in your Amazon cart, like I told you to, and get yourself one. I have at least 8 in my truck at all given times. My wife thinks I'm insane, but I said, think about how many limbs are in our car while we're driving down the road, and how many limbs I'm responsible for, right? I've heard so many stories of people like, you know, whatever you do for an activity, right? I've heard a lot of hunting stories where hunting accidents happen. I've heard of people chainsaw accidents. It's serious, right? These things save lives, and if you know how to apply them, you might save your life, you might save somebody else's. The guy that taught one of these classes, this alert class, he was a paramedic down in Texas. He practiced what he preached, and he was out drinking with his buddies at some sort of NASCAR event. They do weird shit down in Texas. He had a tourniquet on him, and some crazy thing happened where a car went off the road and it hit a 12-year-old kid, and the 12-year-old kid's arm flew off. And so he went down and he applied the tourniquets that he had, and unfortunately he didn't save the kid's life. But the next thing right here, the stopping the dying and having you guys become medically trained, studies have shown that if you are even in any type of a situation where you could help, and you do, your level of PTSD gets lowered that much more for an after action of all these events. So if a police officer's there and he yells in the room, because we're trained to do that, is anyone medically trained here? And you are able to say, yes sir, I know how to apply a tourniquet, for us, that's like golden. We're like, oh, here you go, take some tourniquets. Or if you have one on you, my God, even better, right? So think about that next time. I won't preach too much about that Mike Glover book, but Mike Glover practices having as many tourniquets as possible because they do save lives. And there's some other things to go into too, along with the first aid. You know, CPR certified. If you guys aren't CPR certified, the classes are everywhere, right? Go get CPR certified. Just the basic first aid kit stuff, and then you know, we have quick clot and other hemostatic agents that we know how to plug holes if you get shot in the chest. Those are all really awesome trainings to have and to get yourself prepared for if anything were to happen. And you never know what might happen. It might not be, like I said, an active shooter event. It might be a car accident that you go to. This guy went to a NASCAR event. Just catastrophic stuff that happens. If you're able to help out, you'll actually feel way better about it in the end. So this is just kind of, I think this is a San Bernardino, which if you guys remember, that was a water department Christmas party where the coworker came in. And this is them leaving the building when the police arrive.
If you're not cool, I'm not walking with you. Sir? Go. You walk to that deputy, keep your hands right in the hand, all the way to that deputy. You're going to make a left with the deputy's out. Thank you. Trying to relax, everyone, trying to relax. I'll take a vote before you do, that's for damn sure. Just be cool, okay?
So that's just a clip, just to kind of show they're going to try to get you out as fast as possible, but police are also have to consider like, okay, did we take care of the threat first? Before we put people in harm's way. Medical, I just trained about it, right? Seek additional training and buy tourniquets, buy first aid kits. Get those things on your person. I carry, everyone knows an EDC, everyday carry. So your everyday carry is a big thing now in people, in mostly law enforcement, ex-military people. But your everyday carry, right? Once again, my wife makes fun of me, but I have a fanny pack that I have. I call it my tactical fanny pack because it's tactical. It's not just a fanny pack. And in there, I carry. If you have your LTC, I carry my firearm in there. I keep a small compact. I carry 2 tourniquets. I carry an extra magazine. I carry a knife in case I need it, and I carry quick clot in case I need that. It all fits into my little tactical fanny pack, and wherever I go, I'm carrying that. Right. It doesn't have to be that extreme, but you just think about things that you're going to carry on you, or even like in your vehicles, right? So if you're not going to carry it in your purse or on your person, you have it in your vehicle somewhere where if I need it, I can go get it. Just stuff to start thinking about. And like I said, we could talk about this for 3 days, but just to kind of start thinking about some of the things that you could do to help yourself out. And medical, like I know I've said it over and over, but medical is so important, and it's something that you guys could do that's really simple, that will get you that much more prepared for if anything bad were to ever happen. And just think, like, we hear it all the time, like at police trainings, how many times a Heimlich maneuver has saved somebody, And it's like something that simple could save somebody's life. I know we're getting away from the active shooter type stuff, but it's just really something simple that you could prepare yourself, that if in the time of need you can help out and help somebody, then why not do it, right? So this is the application of a tourniquet. Once again, I'll reiterate, I am not a trainer in application of tourniquets, but this is how they do it. If you do end up buying one, they call it high or die, right? So you put it as high as possible. If you have a bleed in your lower extremity or in your arm, you're going to go into your armpit. If you're lower extremity, you're going to go high up into the groin as possible. And that first wrap is your most important wrap, as tight as possible. You want people to actually say, oh, that hurts. If it hurts, that means that blood is not going through their major arteries. So that's just a little basic tutorial on it. There are like 3 different types of tourniquets that you can get. You can make a tourniquet out of a belt. But if you have an actual tourniquet, like one of these cat teeth tourniquets, they're just lifesavers, and everybody should be carrying one. Mental trauma, right? I won't go too much into this, but PTSD, we all aware of what it is. I kind of talked about what can lower some PTSD. If you actually felt like you helped out in a situation, that certainly manages your stress. But this is kind of for, obviously church clergy. You guys are very aware of how to deal with people who have been through traumatic events or deaths or something like that, and people are going to look for answers somewhere. Well, being part of a religious community is one of those things that people reach out to. This is the Don't Name Them campaign. I kind of touched upon it. We in the media, it's starting to do that a little bit, I think. But the notoriety that people get for the terrible traumatic acts that they put the rest of us through, why are we giving them credit for it? So this is kind of a campaign that they alert started with. Does anyone know who she is? Victoria Soto? Oops, that's the girl that I talked about, the teacher that came out of the closet and put bullets instead of letting the little kids. Does anyone know who this is? I'll be honest, I didn't either, because she thwarted an attempt. She was a teacher at a high school, I believe. Someone brought out a gun. She tackled him immediately. Guess what? We never heard about that, did we? Because the media only picks up on the terrible things. We don't hear about the good things that happen. So just wrapping up, talked about active shooter events. We talked about our disaster response, and the takeaway of these: avoid, deny, defend, run, hide, fight, and just try, like I said, try to prepare yourself going into anything. But then if you script it to yourself, script it to your family members, to your loved ones, and then try to get that denial phase, that freeze phase down to a split second. And you can do that in many different ways, like I talked about. Putting yourself through training, putting yourself in just talking about it like this, I hope would shorten your freeze time down. That if something happened, you would go, oh man, they talked about this. Don't freeze. What do we do? And then get everybody else. Once they've done studies, when you're in a group mentality, and we all know like social aspects of things, sociology and whatnot, that once one person kind of snaps out of it and is able to say to somebody else, like, police officers, we always joke, but it's like, go, when we do CPR, it's like, okay, I'll do CPR, you activate the emergency response. Is that what they used to say? But like, if you can direct somebody, then all of a sudden the environment in the room changes, or the environment in the group changes, and then once everyone else kind of snaps out of it, and then everybody's able to think clearly, right? So if that one person, if you could be that one person in the room that gets everybody to snap out of it and not freeze and say, guys, we got this, come with me, or hey guys, where's our exits, or hey, we need to fight back. You know what I mean? Like, grab that pencil, grab those scissors, let's go. If you get the wine bottle, right? If you can be that person, you will not only save yourself, but you're going to save everybody else around you. And there's, like I said, I won't go into every situation, but in most cases, when you look at these debriefs of these incidents, there's somebody that stood out. Be a Rick Riscola, right? There's somebody that stood out and said, "It's time to move. Let's move." So if you guys can be that person, then I've done my job. And like I said, the Virginia case study just kind of shows what you do matters, right? The decisions and the actions that you take will either make or break a life-threatening situation, not only for yourself but for everybody else around you. With that, I know it's been a heavy couple. I'm sorry I ran a little bit late, but if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to answer them for you.
Thank you.
Yes. I know it's a lot. Yes.
So, all of what you said, how it relates to the folks here.
Yeah.
We have Sunday school upstairs. How do we let the upstairs people know that something's happening in the sanctuary?
Yeah. So.
How do we,
Yeah.
just some tips.
So coming up with a plan is huge, right? So, this is the first time I've ever been in this building. So, as people that come here all the time, you guys are very well acquainted with rooms, interior movement, stuff like that. Is to sit down as a community and say, here's what we need to think about. Here's the threats that we could face, right? That's what we need to think about. If this happens, then this is what we're going to do. And I'm sure you guys have, or you should at least have a fire plan. What happens if there's a fire in the kitchen? What do we do? Well, everybody gets out, and then we're all going to go over here, right? That's something that needs to be at a baseline, right? So with whatever's going on, whether you guys are, church is in session, you guys have Sunday school, whatever the case may be, as long as you have a plan of action, then you'll be able to do that plan a lot better. Then the chaos that will ensue if there is no plan. If there is no plan, then nobody knows what to do. They're going to look towards somebody. Well, what do I do, right? And if there's a few members of the church that say, oh, we talked about this. We said if this happens, we're going to do this. Well, then we go, okay, he knows what to do. I'll follow him. So, if anything, I would just say, have something. That doesn't have to be very specific. I think what happens, especially, the SWAT team, we get muddled down with minutia, right? We're like, let's think about every single little detail that could possibly happen, and we'll come up with a plan for that. When you get there, it gets thrown out the window, right? So have a basic plan. This is what will happen if God forbid anyone ever came in and they started actively killing people. This is what we need to do, right? We need to move out here. These are our exits. Whatever it is, just have a discussion about it, and even just walking through your building and kind of getting an idea of just because there's only one door here, does that mean that's our only way of getting in or out? No, there's a million windows, right? There's windows here. I could see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right here. There's one over here. I don't know where the rest of these doors go, but they're just having an idea of like, okay, how do I get out of here if I need to get out of here, and just making sure that the whole community knows about it. That's all. Yep.
When you were talking about like sometimes people's response is like freezing, playing dead.
Yeah.
I wonder, has there been any like studies around people choosing those options because they're afraid to make a mistake? And is it better to do something and not worry about making a mistake than to let it stop you?
Yes. So absolutely. I don't know if there's any specific studies. I know the studies that they've looked into is how, and we'll say in terms of success of you not being shot or dying, in terms of success, playing dead is bad, right? So your success rate plummets. And so if you look into the reasons why people do that, well, there's a couple different things. One is it's a natural reaction, right? So different people will have different reactions. So the initial reaction was to freeze, right? And then after they've already frozen, now they're playing that. They're actually making an action plan in their head, but their action plan in their head is actually to just play dead and stay here, right? It just doesn't work out. So if you freeze and if you're finding yourself frozen and playing dead, you can still make that decisive action to say, I've deliberated while I've been laying here playing dead, and I've decided this is a bad idea, and I'm going to run for that door, or whatever it is. But that's a very good point to bring up. And like I said, they've changed this model of this training based upon those exact results. Is that, and like we said, look at the Virginia Tech case study where people are just, and when I said again, as far as a social experiment goes, everybody played dead in one of those rooms. Everybody did. And so you didn't want to be the one that stood up and decided to run out of the room because you'd be the one that most likely be shot. But if you can break the mold and just at least think about, like, hey, I had a training about this, so we talked about this. If I can just be that one that does stand up, I could actually save a bunch of these people, and I could save my life and everybody else. That's a really good point that you bring up.
Thank you.
I think one of our challenges is that we have a number of senior citizens
Yep.
who are slow moving
Yep.
and may think freezing is the best way to go. So we have a lot to do to train.
I think that's where you whack them with your cane.
You could do, hey, any means necessary.
Really?
Yeah.
I took a cane on my first flight after January 6th. I was so afraid of those crazy people on the flight. I took a cane.
I'll just say, so this has been brought up in other trainings, especially with a lot of we trained the whole town. There's a couple of people that worked at the senior center, and they said the same thing. Well, what happens at the senior center? They're very slow moving. They're not very mobile. What do I do? And that's more of an ethics question, I guess, is as far as like a person in my position. I would expect me and people within my profession to act a certain way, to put themselves in front of certain dangerous things as opposed to letting very innocent people get injured. But I can't answer for you guys, right? So I can't say, if you're in that situation, should you try to help out all those other elderly people, or should you just get out? I can't answer that. That's only up to you to decide what you would do. But it's something worth thinking about, right? And it's the last time you want to think about it is when it's happening. But usually that's when it is, so. But that's a good point as well. Yep,
Do all first aid kits have tourniquets in them?
no, nope. In fact, most of them probably don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was reading a bunch of articles about this kind of stuff going on, and is it true that churches have been more targeted now than schools and a lot of other places, because they've actually, the police and everybody else have put more law enforcement in the schools and stuff like that, so that we've become more of a target? What is it that we can do for the church itself
Yeah.
to prevent that from
You got one of those things laying right there on the table, I'd say.
Well, that's, yeah.
But yes, so like I said before, these people are going to look for soft targets, and yes, they know that we are, vamping up our schools. Does that protect them all the way? No, but they will look for any means necessary, right? So whatever it is that they think will be an easy target, they're going to choose. Does that make places of worship an easy target? Yeah, it does, unfortunately. So what can be done, right? I will say I heard a story about a guy down in Texas, and everybody down in Texas usually carries a firearm. This man carried a firearm every single day of his life. He woke up and he put it, so we talked about your EDC, he put his wallet, his watch, everything you needed, and he put his firearm on his hip. Because he's from Texas, and they could do that down there, man. LTC or not. So this one day, he's going to church Sunday, he decides, I'm not going to eat this today, and he leaves it in the drawer. Guess what? It was the one day that they actually had an active shooter come in, and unfortunately for him, I don't think he ended up dying in the situation, but he could have saved numerous people, right?
No.
And I'm not saying everyone needs to rush out there and go get their LTC right now, but that's just one aspect, right? Can I protect myself? Do I have what I have, and like I said, what I carry on me? Yes, I'm a police officer. Yes, I do have an LTC, so I can carry those things, but carrying something like that, pepper spray, those things that you can just carry on you that are easy everyday items that you can have that can help protect. If you're in church and something were to happen, you could be that person that stands up and helps everybody out. Also, knowing how to direct everybody, talking about it today, and if something bad were to happen, you being the one that ushers people out the door, save lives, be a Rick Scola, that's another thing that you can take into consideration. Other than that, putting metal detectors inside churches, is it probably not going to happen? Getting private security, no, not going to happen. But that's why they're soft targets. So what can you do as an individual, and what can you do as a church to come together and make sure that everybody is as safe as possible is all incumbent upon what you guys decide to do.
Okay, then that brings up the same, another thought that I was thinking about. For a lot of us that are ushers, on a certain Sunday and everything else, is there extra training that we can actually go through, like with you or with somebody, to make sure that we know exactly what we need to do up there to get it into our brains?
Yep.
So that we can not freeze.
Yep.
And go beyond that.
I would say, you got 2 retired police officers right here. If you decide to bring them upstairs and say, hey, if in the case that something bad were to happen, what should we do and where should we go? They would be very expert testimony, right? Am I wrong? You would know exactly right where to put people. And right where, and as far as what we're thinking, as far as law enforcement goes, when we respond, what do we expect to see when we show up, right? So, whatever it is, because I don't know as far as where you guys are standing when church is happening, or as far as an usher goes, but they'd be able to tell you hey, did you ever think about doing this or whatever? So they're good resources to ask.
I think the biggest thing we need to do is what you said. We need to get a plan in place.
Yep.
And then what we need to do, maybe once every 6 months, is drill and have a drill and see what happens.
Yeah, sounds crazy, but is it is it better safe than sorry sometimes? Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep.
Have there been, I know Massachusetts has a very low gun death rate, and have there been any church attacks in the state?
If there was, it's not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
So,
Nothing in recent history I
Yeah.
can think of.
Doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
Right.
No,
exactly.
but
Exactly.
we're, yeah.
Yeah.
It's different, there's a different environment here than in Texas where everyone has a gun.
Yes and no. As far as like people obtaining guns in order to commit those acts, I think it's just as likely here as anywhere else, because if you look at statistics, people that get illegal guns don't get them from the state that they're from. So people who have illegal guns can just as easily get them from somewhere else. So is it more likely than not that would happen here than in a state that has access to firearms? Just as equal. Sometimes even more. There's more gun-related violence in some states that have very lenient gun laws, right? Because guns are they're part of the U.S. culture. And people can get them pretty much anywhere. So preparing for in Massachusetts as you would prepare for in Texas, I would, just like with these, where this training comes out of is a Texas company, we all train the same now because they could happen anywhere, at any time.
I think the red flags also at the beginning of this, when you were telling us about, we gotta look for those red flags.
Yeah.
If we, because these people are usually not random that are coming in to cause this. I mean, it could happen, but they know the buildings, they know with what they're doing. They've already planned it out.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a random person coming in like yourself. See you coming in, you don't even know how to get upstairs at this point.
But somebody that's been
downstairs.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
but that's what we have to look at. Do we have any red flags?
Yeah.
Do we have any issues?
And like we don't have mental health problems right now. Just
Off the wall.
just from the 15 years I've been a police officer, they've gone from here to here, and I could tell you why. The reason why I think they're like that, but the fact of the matter is that they're just like that, right? It's just mental health is running rampant right now. So if you do see somebody who shows any sort of signs of what might potentially be violence, just and you're not doing the wrong thing, you're doing the right thing, just to make sure someone check. We have so many things in place right now as far as what the police can do. We have mental health clinicians that work with us now, bringing them to the hospital to make sure they seek proper care, just making sure that people are anyone that exhibits signs of violence that you might, that stand out. And we all know what those things are, right? I don't have to go through a training on that, because when someone says something that irks you the wrong way and you say, all right, that person has potential to be a violent person. And I don't just mean someone who acts crazy, because it's not illegal to be crazy, but someone who actually makes threatening remarks, those should not be taken lightly. Or just like we said, that's somebody else's problem, right? Take it upon yourself to say, I got to call somebody, whether it's just talking to your pastor or talking to the police, just making sure somebody knows that, I've reported this.
The one quick one is, somebody had asked me the question, and we'll just pass it on to you, is we're in church or having service, should we only have a one in once it begins, once service starts?
Yeah.
Like the schools,
Yeah.
they shut down every door, they're all locked.
Yeah.
You can no longer come in through the lunchroom or the gymnasium or
I would just
the
say,
lockers, they have to come through, the main door and then get buzzed in, and
yeah,
I'm not saying that, but like, just make sure everyone comes in through the main door once church is in service, or
I would just say gaining entrance is one thing, so you can control the flow,
Correct.
but making sure that there's still a way to egress. You know what I mean? In the case
Yes.
of an emergency, right?
well, like that
So-
door, if you push it, we can lock it,
Yeah.
but if you want
Push
to
it,
get out,
you can get out.
you can get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Control.
that's what we should be teaching our, say, the ushers.
Yeah.
Once,
Well, same thing like everything, right?
begins.
You're controlling access. You're controlling access to the rest of the building if need be, but you're also controlling access to people. So
Yes.
if someone's coming in, but as long as people can still get out
Get out.
easily, then I would say that's probably a good idea. Yeah. Yes.
You had said that in most cases it's a single shooter.
Yep.
How often is it more than one?
3%, less than 3%. As of the most, obviously there's been, since I took this training like 6 months ago, there's probably been something that skewed the scales a little bit, but it was under 3%. But it does happen, but not very likely. Yes, sir.
is it true that one of the simplest things I think we can do is to get the ushers together, come up with a list of things that we're looking for, but as general, don't have the church appear as a soft target. Be organized. When people come, one of the things the ushers do is, hi, how you doing? You greet people, and at that moment, you're kind of sizing some people up, because in our last church I was in, we had Darren Devine used to come there, and a real, obviously mentally ill, and those little indicators will kind of present themselves. So just being organized and greeting people and knowing what the ushers are looking for before, during, and after the service, and what a response would be. It's just upon us, not for Ryan to come up with, but for us to kind of have a consensus, what we want to do and how we want to respond. And
you guys know better than anybody else how the day in, day out this church runs, right? So, just like us in patrol, when we patrol an area, we get used to what looks normal and what doesn't look normal. So, you guys, being members of this church, coming to church, will notice what is normal and what is not normal. And so, don't let things that turn out to be not normal make you freeze, right? Make you go, I'm not going to deal with that. It just doesn't look normal, but I'm just not going to pay attention to what happens. There's another video on here that I didn't show, but there's a case of denial, right? It's a guy in a convenience store. I think it's in Australia. And he walks into the convenience store and he looks at, it's a 6'1" man dressed in a dress holding, what is that? He's holding an axe. She's holding a giant fireman's axe in a convenience store, and because he didn't want to be impolite, because in today's society we're told, we don't talk about things like that, we won't address them, and he wanted to stay polite, so he just ignored what was going on. And this guy with an axe was standing behind him at the registry, and at one point you can see him turn around and he touches the axe. He acknowledges the fact that there's a person in the convenience store holding an axe, which, other than a Halloween costume, when is that okay, right? And so he acknowledges the fact that he's holding an axe. He goes back, turns around to go talk to the teller, and gets brutally bashed on the top of the head, right? So, I'm telling that story just because we know what looks wrong, right? And we can tell, our instinct is something's not right here. But don't let social cues or let the fear of, being rude make you not act accordingly to save your own life, right? We can all tell, there's a bunch of stories about it, but we can all tell, like, we don't want to be portrayed as being impolite. I understand that, but if it comes down to a life or death situation, we have to be able to at least be concerned about the red flags that we see. And we know what those red flags are. From a very early age, like my kids are little, they know who the bad kids in school are. I can tell you. And we all knew that, right? They're the disruptive ones. Like, you can tell immediately, you can judge someone's character very fast by talking with them. And you guys, as human beings, we are a social animal, we're a social creature. We can tell very quickly, who's out there to do us harm and who's not. And just being able to speak up about it is huge.
Let's thank Officer Brulé again for